Welcome to Dramaticus, the shit show about life as an acute care nurse. Here we take a holistic approach to telling you just how screwed up things really are being a nurse. My name's Jason Wolfe. I've been a nurse now just under 10 years. And in those 10 years, I've seen a lot of crazy things. And in the twilight of, let's say, my career, it's led me to talking about some of these things I've seen and maybe seeing if we can change them through the medium of podcasting. I'm joined by my co-host, Lydia, who has been a nurse just under 10 years. We met at our first job in the hospital, and we've been great friends ever since. She's an ICU nurse. She delivers the best care around to her patients, and I'm so excited to have her on our show because she has very little in the way of a filter and tells you exactly how things really are.
That last part's definitely true. As Jason said, I've also been a nurse for just under 10 years. Been very disillusioned with nursing for a long time. I made the jump to travel nursing because I think nursing sucks so bad that why do it if I'm not going to get paid the most that I can? I wanted to join this show because throughout all of my different contracts, I'm currently on my 16th travel contract. I've met a lot of other nurses along the way who feel the same. So I'm hoping to give them a voice and maybe just reach someone, and if anything else, just let them know that they're not alone in this field that we're all in together. On a personal note, I'm a huge Pistons fan, and I try to do as much as possible that doesn't remind me of the medical field at all. So for my own mental health, I love to travel, spend time with my family, things like that. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited for you guys to listen, and I hope that you can relate or at least get some laughs out of it.
Awesome. Welcome, Lydia. I look forward to doing the show with you.
Same here.
So you may be asking yourself, why am I listening to this show? Or, why did I create this show or take my time to put a podcast together when I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing? Well, I've reached a point in my career to where I've worked for multiple different hospital systems across Michigan, and they seem to be all slightly different flavors of corporate medicine and pretty much hospital factories. So trying to bring change to these institutions, you find yourself banging your head against the wall. So really this podcast for me is an attempt to take back my power, to bring about change maybe outside of the system by talking to nurses directly through podcasting. The goal of this podcast, for me at least, is a little bit talk therapy and also shedding light on the problems we as nurses are facing and bringing attention to the time and period that we are currently living in to allow nurses to see just how much power we have to bring about change to the places that we work. Lydia, why don't you tell us maybe a little bit why you joined the podcast?
Thanks, Jason. When you first approached me about doing this show, I was a little skeptical because I think maybe a lot of nurses out there don't realize how much power we actually do have, as you touched on there. But nothing will be done unless people start coming together and speaking out and speaking up. It isn't just an individual thing. Statistically, healthcare workers are 4 times as likely to experience assault on their job than someone who is in the private industry. You and I know that we have both experienced this. I've been assaulted. I'd only been a nurse a year. The first time I was sent to the ER by a patient. You get screamed at. As a female, I've been groped. Unfortunately, people don't think twice before trying to hurt or threaten or abuse their nurses, their CNAs, their respiratory therapists. And it's definitely something that needs to change. 50% of all workplace violence is committed against healthcare workers. And this is just one of the major issues of why there needs to be changes brought about. And if I can bring a voice to that, or even help someone to feel that whatever they just went through wasn't their fault, they're not alone, that's really important to me.
Yeah. And so, when you got assaulted that first time, Lydia, did the patient get arrested, or was there a write-up? Or let me guess, did your manager say, what could you have done better?
That's actually exactly what happened about what could we have done better. The patient tried to break my arm. Went to the ER. Luckily, it was just luckily a severe sprain, which had me in a brace for 6 weeks. But then I was hassled by management because they were short staffed. And so I had to do light duty, but I was made to feel as if I was an inconvenience because I was one less member of their staff down.
Right. Exactly. And so, this is just a plethora of kind of the challenges we're facing today in nursing. And a lot of these things were all there, lateral violence, violence from our patients because their tummy hurts and they feel like they can act a fool as soon as they walk through those doors and sit in our bed. And it's like a free zone for a free for all. And suddenly people start acting like toddlers. All of this existed pre-COVID. Now, what we've all gone through is this pandemic, an ongoing pandemic that has just added another layer of stress to our already stressed out and overworked hospital workers and systems. So I think it's really kind of removing this corporate mask that a lot of these systems had, that they cared about us as nurses, that they cared about the patients. And now we're really getting to see what motivations there are behind profits, behind the direction and goal of these large healthcare organizations that are taking care of all of us, all of our communities, all of America. So why this podcast is for nurses, I think it can apply to just your average listener too, because at the end of the day, we're all going to get sick and we're all going to have to be part of this healthcare system.
Like you were saying, after the pandemic, the behavior is only getting worse. Violence against healthcare workers is getting worse and worse. We're seeing, you see on the news these the cell phone videos of people behaving badly on airplanes. Those instances are rising because after the pandemic, people have just felt that they could go crazy and act any type of way. But in the hospitals, in the patients' rooms, we don't have cell phone cameras, so nobody can see what's happening to us, and it's very easy for the public to turn their backs and act like it's not happening. Because again, they don't have those cell phone videos. They don't have it put in their face every day of how bad people treat nurses. So hopefully through this show, we can bring a little more awareness to that, and not just to the violence aspect, but to all of the other ways that nurses are mistreated through, poor pay, through unsafe staffing ratios, through not getting breaks. Nurses get UTIs at much higher frequencies because we don't even have time to go to the bathroom. So again, if this show can help bring awareness to the many, many, many ways that healthcare workers are mistreated, that's what we want to do here.
You brought up a good point there, Lydia, about these cell phone videos. These corporate entities and large healthcare systems, they have policies in place for social media where if you say anything, you can lose your job quickly. And then you layer onto that HIPAA violations. So there is no insight really into our places of work. And then the hospitals want to kind of tamp down any type of poor optics about their organizations. So everything always, seems like roses and butterflies on the outside. That's what these places are portraying. But then when you pull back the curtain and you see what's really going on, it's much, much different than what people actually think. And especially as soon as those new nurses graduate and they hit the floor for the first time, you see such a high turnover rate where I saw some type of statistic where up to, I think, 30 or 40% after 6 months, new nurses are leaving nursing altogether because it's just such a shock to them.
I don't blame them. Rather than be burned out or have a lifelong back injury, or, I've suffered from compassion fatigue for a long time, as I know a lot of my colleagues have as well. Or you could develop a drinking or a substance abuse problem just from trying to cope with the overwhelming stress or, the horrors that we see. So I don't blame them. I don't blame them for getting out early either.
So I want to ask you, Lydia, how's your pandemic going? And where were you when the pandemic first kind of kicked off, and how has COVID changed you and your perspective on nursing and your perspective on life, maybe?
My pandemic has been rough. I think like everyone, but luckily I'm a travel nurse, so I take a lot of breaks. However, I think last winter for me, and I'm talking, November 2020, December 2020, and then into January 2021, I was on a contract in a COVID ICU. And I just think the amount of death that I saw in the span of 14 weeks, because that's how long I was on that contract, I'd never, ever, ever in like the previous, what was it then? I don't know, 9 years of nursing, I'd never seen as many people die as I saw in that span of 14 weeks. We'd have 3 people dead in the first 4 hours of the shift, on a lot of shifts. And you can't see that many people die or load that many body bags and come out clean on the other side. I think anybody who says that they were there and that they're fine is probably struggling more than most because they haven't maybe come to the admittance step. And I think everybody deals with it in their own way. So I wouldn't judge anyone who says they're fine, but I just really don't know how anybody could see the death that we all saw during last winter. And now we're getting ready for it again this winter and be okay with it. So I think that was definitely the lowest point for me by far. This was, obviously before vaccines, and there was really no hope, but you were still hearing, people say, oh, I didn't think it was real. You'd call loved ones to inform them that their family member had just died. And it was a lot of regret, like, oh, we wish we'd taken it more seriously. We didn't know it was real. And I think now it's a completely more defeating part of the pandemic to where I'm at now, because you're still hearing those same things. But we've been in this pandemic for 2 years, and now there's a easily available vaccine that's free that people still are choosing to not take. And if anything, mentally, it's a little bit better to me, for me anyway, that there is that vaccine, but it's only the people, for the vast majority, who have chosen not to take it, who are dying. I've only put one fully vaccinated patient into a COVID body bag. And I guess if I have to find a way to cope, it's to look at it that way, that people chose to listen to the rampant misinformation from Facebook or other podcast hosts or whoever about, instead of their doctors, about getting vaccinated. And now I've moved to an anger stage. I guess if the pandemic has been a spectrum, I think last winter was grief and now I'm at angry. So how's your pandemic going?
Yeah, I would echo that. The death and destruction was wholesale in the beginning. And, it didn't seem like there was any light at the end of the tunnel until, we basically landed a spaceship on the moon when we came up with this pandemic. And this vaccine in 6 months, not just one, but 3. Like, the scientific feat of that is astounding. And, people just choose to poo-poo it, not take it. Just the other day, I had to take one of my patients over to say goodbye to their mother as they took their last breath because they weren't vaccinated and gave their mom, COVID, and they had COVID. It's stories like this over and over that we saw that I think a lot of nurses, myself included, we're now just starting to come to grips with this. I started when the pandemic kicked off. I was working in a flex position, so I'd go between 5 different hospitals, any floor. And so, of course, in the beginning, it was always COVID floors as the numbers started to creep up. And I vividly remember one night, nurses crying because we had no idea what was going on. We didn't have any PPE, crying that they didn't want to be there. There was no staff nurses. It was all these flex nurses or pull nurses running the floor. And then my very first experience with COVID, I was working at a shift one night, and they used to have like suspected people or rule out people back then. And it was this person who was suspected of having COVID, and he kept wanting to leave. And we didn't know the rules, like, okay, you have this possibly very deadly virus. We knew nothing at this time about how deadly it could be, or the transmission rates, etc. And he wanted to leave. And I was like basically negotiating with him of how to keep him in his room, because I was like, do I restrain him? What do I do? He's a hazard to everyone. And when it came down to it, the person was hungry. They didn't want the food that they had to offer. So I asked them what they wanted. I actually left on break, went to Taco Bell, got him a burrito, and he ended up staying for a while. But the next shift, he actually kind of left AMA, coughed in a nurse's face on the way out, and she had to go home and quarantined. It was just chaos. The chaos has gotten slightly better. It's ebbed a little bit. I'm not seeing. I think my highest death rate was 4 in a shift when I got pulled to an ICU. I never knew I would be this good at like bagging and tagging people. I mean, I can do it.
What it is. That's what
right?
it is.
And I
Tag them and tag them.
Yeah,
Get them
and
ready for the next one that's going to go in this bed until that plug is pulled or whatever.
right. And the stories just go on. And I thought, okay, once we just got to hold out until we get a vaccine. Then we're going to shift the tide. Then we're going to see difference. This pandemic will come to an end. And lo and behold, it's just perpetual, it seems like.
Not enough people took the vaccine.
Right. And I'm not sure what I think herd immunity's achieved, what, 80 or 90% or something like that.
Well, now because of the Delta variant being more contagious, they had to move it to 90%. At first, it was 70%, and people don't understand that. I think a lot of people point to like saying, "Oh, the goalposts moved." Yeah, because the anti-vaxxers bred a much more deadly, much more contagious variant, so it had to move. Like science adjusts to new variables. And again, I don't think a lot of anti-vaxxers understand science, but yeah, now it's at 90%, unfortunately, because of the Delta variant.
Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people understand science, and not trying to be like elitist or poo-pooing it. It's just kind of like the scientific method and how it plays out. I think American society, especially when it comes to the medical institution, they're used to us having the answers and having it all figured out. I've talked a lot about this with my friend who's a doc, and the American public basically was seeing us deal with a novel virus and doing rapid research in real time.
In real time. That's the difference that people don't understand. Right. So of course we were going to be wrong about a few things in the beginning.
Yeah, it's this idea, back in the 50s, we thought asbestos was good for us. And then things changed. Yeah. So we changed how we dealt with asbestos. This is what's happening with COVID in real time. And a lot of people are just so used to like, tell me what life is, tell me how to think. And when we live in times of uncertainty like we do now, if someone is telling you this is how it is, even if they are wrong, AKA Donald Trump, people will believe them. When people are scared, they will believe someone who is telling them a consistent message, even if that message is not the truth. And I think this is how the virus got politicized. And it's not just the Republicans who politicize it too. Politicians, they say, don't let any good crisis go to waste. So, there's blame on both sides.
Hospitals management was left scrambling because they didn't know what to do either. Nurses were getting burned out faster. Management didn't know what to do. And then, nurses started leaving in droves for either they didn't have health care because daycare's closed, or nurses had been looking for an excuse to retire, and COVID is the best reason ever. So that's when you started having this like mass exodus of nurses, and management was left scrambling. And again, trying to deal with multiple things like new policies for COVID, but also short staffing. And that's when you started hearing about these bullshit pizza parties or thanks healthcare heroes billboards, instead of like genuinely showing gratitude to the nurses who had, I don't want to say they stuck it out, because I think I don't ever want to seem like I'm shaming or putting down anyone who chose to leave nursing, because I'm considering it. I'm going to get that right out in the open. Like, I've been trying to get out of nursing for a while, so I do not blame or put down or think less of anyone who made that decision for themselves. And I hope no one hearing this or in future episodes when we talk about leaving nursing, please know that myself, and I definitely don't think Jason blames anyone either, because if that's the choice that people needed to make for themselves, that's what's best for them. And
I mean, to your point, Lydia, it was already bad before COVID, but COVID added this extra layer of stress. And like what you were talking about, nurses leaving in droves. I was sitting in a town hall and a director of nursing came down and they said, you know, the next 5 to 10 years, there was supposed to be a slow retirement of nurses. And that first year of COVID accelerated the exodus of these nurses that were planning to retire over this time. And it has led to a shortfall now to where we need 2 million nurses by 2026. We understand COVID. We pretty much have it handled. The crisis now in medicine isn't so much COVID, it's staffing and lack of nurses. And we're starting to see it every shift. Every day you go in, you're short, and it's bleeding into the care that we can give our patients. And what really is just so infuriating to me is management isn't even talking about what we're gonna do to fix this staffing problem. You know, having more pizza parties, that ain't the answer.
Gunshot wound.
Right. I mean, you can pay me more money. You can pay me obscene amount of money hourly, and I'll come in and put up with the bullshit.
Which is a good place to start.
It's a great place to start.
I think it would help a lot of problems.
Right. As nurses, we should be getting paid more, but you know, paying me like maybe what my hourly rate is now as a travel contract probably isn't sustainable for an entire workforce. But I need that type of hourly wage in order to go in and put up with the bullshit that is nursing right now in the hospitals.
Yep.
I will be and continue to work as a nurse if we can change our working conditions. And I think it starts with figuring out the staffing crisis. And if management isn't going to do it, then we have to do it as nurses. Because this corporate medicine structure, we live in a capitalistic society. So of course, medicine is going to be corporatized. And they're still generating the same amount of revenue with less workers, the same amount of work.
If anything, they're generating more revenue because there's more patients.
Right. And so what I kind of realized here recently is patients, in my mind, are becoming actually secondary to charting. You know, if our listeners are familiar with the two big systems, Cerner or Epic, you fill those out during your shift and you're like, who in the hell looks at these flow sheets? I've talked to my doctor friends, they don't look at them.
Box is checked every 4 hours, regardless of whatever the fuck the box is. Just check it.
Right.
Every 4 hours.
And it's like, you know, this isn't built for healthcare. And someone said to me, no, it's not built for healthcare. It's built for billing and increasing revenue. And then a light kind of clicked. It's like, oh, no wonder they always want us to do these hourly checks or this check that we're actually not doing. And we're just make-believe charting. And so nurses are spending more and more time in their computer and doing pretend care from the chair and not actually seeing their patients. Like these EMRs and these computer charting systems have created such a big barrier between the nurse and their patients. It's insane. And why hospitals are allowing this, it's for revenue.
Like you can be the worst nurse, and we're going to admit right here, right now, that there are some bad nurses out there.
Yeah, I have bad shifts. I'm not the best nurse every time. Like I get burnt out. Like I'll be truthful.
But you might never be in your patient's room. But as long as your charting is like, quote unquote, perfect, and you have said you've done all these things, or you've checked all whatever boxes they wanted you to have, management will love you because that's what's important to them, not whether you are even in the room with the patient, you know? And, right. But again, that speaks to how out of touch management is. Like going back to the ways to show appreciation. Jason, did you see during Nurses Week how many hospital systems were, one of the activities was doing rock painting to show appreciation, and it was supposed to be encouragement stones. I saw a few of those on Twitter, and I'm like, they have to have been posted by some type of manager or whatever who's so out of freaking touch that they don't realize they're giving a fucking rock to someone to show appreciation. Pretty sure the only reason I want that fucking rock is to throw it through your goddamn window after a shitty shift, because that's the only way I'm going to get any type of anything out of this fucking rock here, so you can keep it.
Right. And, you know, it's easy from our perspective to paint management as the bad guy. And I don't want to do that per se on the show. I want to like shed light on it, because I firmly believe whatever circumstance or whatever job role we're, you know, told to do, people are generally the heroes of their own story. So they're trying to do what's right and do what's best in their work environment and what they're tasked with doing. But it just kind of falls off the rails when you start making medicine corporatized or corporate medicine.
To be clear, when I say management, I mean management at large. I mean everything from your nursing unit manager all the way up to your administrators, you know, and it just goes of varying degrees of how out of touch they are as you get closer to the top. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Because
CNO guaranteed that person has not worked bedside in at least 15 years. Probably more in a lot of cases. So they're going to be the most out of touch, and then it just goes down.
But you see it even pretty quickly on a nurse that transitions from a floor nurse to a new manager. So it speaks to the type of pressures and things of importance that their bosses are putting on them. So I think it happens pretty quickly. You know, one of the things over the course of the show that I would like to do is really talk to some of these people and break down the silos and understand like why it is they seem so out of touch and how that happens so quickly. In an ideal world, I think of this like ideal hospital, you know, the goal of the show for me is like, how can we save nursing? How can we save healthcare? It sounds crazy, right? But in an ideal world, I think of this nurse-run hospital where all of the policies and things that have to do with delivering patient care come from the people doing the work, the nurses at the bedside. It's not a top-down approach, it's a bottom-up approach. So we inform our bosses of what like the best way to put in a Foley, you know, that's evidence-based, etc. And then that goes into policy. And then as a large, you know, organization, we push to get the laws changed to follow that. But it starts at the bedside. This is like the nursing lab. And we shouldn't be being dictated to on how to take care of our patients. We should be dictating to these organizations about how patients need to be cared for. Yep. So that's kind of like what my big onus of the show is I want to let nurses know that we are in such high demand right now.
We're running the show, and we've always run the show, but now
always run the show, but
we've got management and everybody by the balls because
right now we really do, but we still so many people on the floor of this mindset. And I hate when people say this. I don't want to get in trouble. Yep. What do you mean get in trouble? This isn't fucking grade school.
You're a warm body. So what if you speak out about how shitty shit is? You show up at 7 p.m., right? You have a license.
People are afraid of getting fired, or you know, they like consistency, and nurses are all about consistency, because if you think about what we're doing, like we have to create this muscle memory and do the same thing consistently day after day in order to practice safe, because there's so much that goes into our actual job that people don't realize. So change sometimes scares nurses, and losing a job scares them. But what they need to realize is that nursing is kind of the same across the board to practice safe. But right now, if you lose a job, it doesn't matter. There's so many jobs right now. And that's really,
lowered the bar on who they're even willing to take. So why not shoot your shot?
Yeah. And I'm not going to lie. When I first thought of this podcast, I just had a nurse say, when I've been talking about the podcast, when I'm at work, you know, aren't you worried about your companies or corporations or the hospitals hearing this podcast? Aren't you worried about losing your job? And I go, you know, that was generally used to be a worry for me at first, but I came to this place here recently where I'm like, the current state of nursing is so fucked up that I
Yeah.
want to leave anyways. So if they fire me, what do I have to lose? So
Let me just burn this bridge to the ground and piss on the ashes, as long as
because maybe by
still there.
speaking truth to this, we can bring about a little bit of change. We can wake some people up and kind of kick over the current healthcare structure, burn it down, and rebuild it in a better image that is more equitable, inclusive for nurses, for patients, and make something that will, make a difference in people's lives. That's the big overall goal, but who knows? We'll see.
Well, you're a lot more optimistic than me. You're a lot more patient than me, and you have this very high goal, which I think is truly admirable. But for me, I think I've been burned out for so long, and I think maybe a lot of listeners out that are listening to us right now will relate to, maybe this is too big of a goal. But even if that's the case, I'd like to encourage those people, even if you can't change your place of work, just understand that there are, as you said, anybody is hiring anybody who's willing to show up at 7 or just around there anyway, and has an active license. So move on to another place for more money or less bullshit or whatever the case. Like, you are not beholden to these corporations, and that's what hospital systems are. These corporations that would have your job posted. If you died tomorrow, they'd have your job posted faster than anybody would know you were dead,
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And I guess too, what I want to say to a lot of staff nurses that I see, it's like, nursing isn't, just about the money. Yeah. Well, you can't get into nursing for the money. I don't think it's bad to say, like, I need to get paid a livable wage. I'm a professional. I have a lot of skills to bring to the table.
Or even beyond a livable wage, for the amount of bullshit that we go through. No other profession is getting assaulted and then having no consequences against our attackers or our abusers or whatever. So right. I think above a livable wage isn't even that crazy to ask.
Yeah. I think nurses should know that just going to take another staff job or a different hospital, it's short-staffed everywhere. It's like this everywhere. So what suddenly makes going into work a little bit more palpable? When you're getting paid a premium wage. It makes it a lot easier. I applaud actually those nurses that are sticking it out. We need nurses that stay on units, and they need that specialty knowledge to help travelers like me give the best care possible to our patients. But if you can't take it anymore, find something different.
No shame in it. That's what's right for you.
And that's why I think your perspective, Lydia, on the show is going to be so great, because you may not think this big, hairy, audacious goal that I'm laying out is possible, but you bring it down to a more real place of what can I do to improve my individual life? Here's some tips. So I think that perspective is going to be really valuable for us moving forward.
And we just want everybody out there, whatever place you're in nursing, considering leaving, still staying, have already gotten out. This show, we hope you'll continue to listen, and we look forward to bringing you more.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. Please tell your friends about us. You're listening to Dramaticus, and we can't wait for our next episode to share more about nursing and what's going on. Thanks again.
It's a shit show, but it's our shit show.